Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. Sorry I had to drop my jacket off, it's extremely hot here. What I'm going to talk to you about in the next half hour is the next major paradigm shift in the IT industry. It seems that the IT industry creates one of those every decade. And I've been working long enough in this industry to have seen them. Remember in the 80s, it was all about personal computing, making people more productive. The 90s was characterized by the rise of the internet and all the new business models that were created with that. In 2000, it was mainly about mobility, mobile computing, and how we managed to actually squeeze more efficiency and collide cycle times. And now we're in front of the next major one. Actually, there are two. One is cloud computing, which this conference is all about. But I'm not going to talk about it. If you're interested to understand what we do in cloud computing, please join us in the booth. We have a full range of offerings from private to public cloud, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, application as a service. I'm going to talk about the other one. I'm going to talk about how corporations can gain competitiveness by becoming a data-driven enterprise. And as I was preparing for this speech, I was trying to look for a theme that I could put around this story. And right at the same time, I was watching one of my favorite movies. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's called Analyze This. It's the story about De Niro playing the mafia boss that is depressed, and he's accidentally bumping into a psychiatrist played by Billy Crystal. And I said to myself, well, this is it. Big data is the shrink. Let me tell you where I'm going with this, because maybe some of you maybe are a bit puzzled with this story. If you have something wrong with you and you go and see a doctor, you're trying to figure out what's going on. So he does a couple of checks on you, blood pressure, temperature, urine test, or whatever, and very quickly he will tell you what the issue is. But when something is wrong with your inner self, you don't go to a doctor, you go and see a shrink. And he, through a lot of analysis, will deep dive into your psyche to figure out what the hell is wrong with you. I mean, not with you personally, sir. No, just not picking on you. Just as an example. So basically, that's the starting point. So I'll talk about four major things. So what are the drivers around big data? I'll take you through some cases. How do you build a roadmap to big data? You don't have to scratch everything that you did. You can build on what you already have, and just one slide at the end about what we can offer. All right, so let's look at the trends. There is a wide understanding now in the press and with a lot of big names like McKinsey's and Boston Consulting Group, Harvard Business Review are all writing about that story. Actually, Harvard Business Review just wrote a study and said, data scientist is the sexiest job in the 21st century. All those studies have one thing in common. They show you that by taking decisions based on data and precise data, companies who do that, they gain on average 20% more profitability. So that's basically point number one. These are the facts. Now, what is the cause? The cause is first, what we talked about, mobile computing and the explosion of mobile computing. We have today 5 billion connected phones, 1 billion of smartphones that are creating an enormous mass of data. So that's one. The second one are sensors, and they start to appear everywhere. In shoes, in cars, in smart meter, in tennis rackets, and they are all, again, producing masses of data. And what we start to see are genome sensors. This is what the biotech and medical industry would like to shove up us somewhere part of our body. So we'll be wandering around at some point in time as a wandering radio transmitter. So all these things are actually generating a lot of data. And the data that we have created in the last 2 years are by far superior to all the data that was created since the beginning of IT. So that's kind of the cause behind this explosion of data. And by the way, a lot of that data is exploding outside of your firewall. So it is no longer inside of your company. So hard to get your hands on it. Now there is also something else. There is the rise of the Y generation, the millennial generation. So your kids, people who grew up digital native and live on social media. And they are, again, changing the rule of the game. Because if you remember your marketing studies, Philip Kotler, it was all about product, price, place, and promotion. But now you need to add a fifth P to the equation, and that's people. Because for the first time in history, your customers are not at the end of your cycle or production cycle waiting for your products to be consumed. They can interact with you at any point in time in the cycle. They can influence your R&D. They can tell you what they think your product should look like. They can help you to support them. You can have your best advocates out there, or you can have your worst nightmare. Do you know how to handle this? Now, all this is, we did a study of roughly 300 plus C-level people, and they are telling us basically the following. All of them are gathering more data than they used to do in the past. But the issue is the following, is they are very poorly equipped to process it. They don't have the skills, they don't have the tools, they don't have the processes to handle it properly. Some of them are even capable of telling you precisely how much money they are losing because they're not processing it well. And last but not least, they all come to an agreement that if you want to process or work with big data, you have to have an industry dimension to it. A big data story in a telecom customer has nothing to do with a big data story in financial services or the biotech company. So that's the recognition. So what makes big data so specific? Number one, we already mentioned it, is the volume and the explosion of data that is mainly happening outside of your firewall now. The second one is velocity, the speed at which those data can be captured and acted upon. And I'll give you a very clear case later on. And the third one is this variety of data. It's no longer about structured data, it's semi-structured data, it is unstructured data, things that are coming from Twitter feeds, social media, digital sensor, binary data. How do you process all this together in order to get to value? Now this is the moment where we need to rethink our decision-making process. Because traditionally, in a lot of organizations, decisions have been made based on hippos. And I'm not talking about those kind of hippos. I'm talking about those kind of hippos. The highest paid person opinion. So the bosses. So the bosses, because of their position, are the ones that are calling the shots. They're supposed to be the smartest guys. But now with data, you can change this around. This is the time to challenge the data and say, well, actually, what is the data really telling us? Where do we get this data from? And how accurate or how fresh is this data? And let me give you an example. This is a true story, I'm not making it up. You can research it on the internet. The city of Singapore wanted to do some analysis to figure out the number one reason for not finding a taxi on a rainy day in Singapore. So they wanted to do a little experiment. And they went to the hippo, the mayor, to ask to sign it off. And you know what the mayor said? Why do you want to do this? It's ridiculous. I know the answer. On a rainy day, everybody jumps in a taxi. That's why you don't find them. My cat will even know this. You heard the expression, my cat will know this? But you know what? Sometimes what you see may not really be what you think. Okay? So let me tell you what the data actually told us. They did the experiment. They took all the GPS data of the taxis for the last 10 years, loaded them up in the database. They took all the weather report data, correlated together, and guess what? They found out that the reason was the taxi drivers on a rainy day were just sitting on the side of the road idle. Funny. Okay? They started to research it a little bit more, and they found out that most of those taxis that were sitting idle were coming from the same big company, one big taxi company. Okay, let's go back. And further analysis, they found out that the company had a policy of retaining $1,000 of the taxi driver's payslip in case of an accident. Now, when the accident happened? On a rainy day. So you see how you go from, it is obvious, guys, you know, everybody jumps on a taxi, my cat will know the answer, to something that is data-driven. This is the game we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of data cases. Number one, telecom industry. Big issues in the telecom industry is how to reduce churn, people jumping from one network to the other, how to increase the revenue per user, how to stop the cannibalization. They are losing a lot of revenue from SMS traffic. The telecom industry lost 14 billion of SMS revenue in the last year because of iMessage and WhatsApp. So your cash cow is going away. What do you do about it? And how do you optimize that pipe? I was talking to a telecom exec in Russia the other day, and he said, you know, since Apple introduced the iPhone 4 with Retina display, we have seen an incremental demand on our network. But we don't know how to invoice it back to our customers. So we need to understand what people are actually doing with that network and how to optimize the pricing schemes around this. This is all about big data. Another one told me, you know what? We are doing fine-grained analysis on community. We are looking who is the person in a community that is generating the traffic among different other people. Who's the one that is making most of the calls? And what is the minimum incentive that we have to give to this person in order for the whole community to start to communicate more? This is all about big data. That's the telecom industry. The car industry, or any big manufacturing industry that has to deal with complex manufacturing processes and how to handle recall. So think about when Toyota had this big recall case on their cars. That is very expensive to do because you have to go back in your historical data, load them up, figure it out. It's very costly and very hard to do. This is an ideal case for big data because you need to do things. It's about massive data. You have to do it in real time. You have to make it available, and that's why you need an appliance to do this. The next one is the airline industry or any customer-centric services company. You know, I do a lot of flights. I fly average, every week. And I try to consolidate my flights with one carrier, which is Star Alliance. When I'm with them, they give me all the premium services, of course, because they have access to my historical record. But they have no idea about me as a customer as a whole. For instance, my son is soon to go to university. Not sure that he will be staying in the same country where I am. Is that the information that will be useful for them? For sure. Do they know about it? I'm not sure. Do they know, for instance, when his next vacation are due? Not sure. What if they would call me and say, you know, sir, we have enough miles. Your son's vacation is up. It's coming soon. Would you mind if we get him a ticket and fly him back home? What do you think I'm going to say? No, keep him there. I want to see him. So, I mean, this is the kind of things that you can do when you have intelligence data and not just looking at your pure transactional information. So how do you build an architecture? Because you don't have to start from scratch. So most of you today have already this. So they take some of their high-density data, revenue, products, geographies, quarterly numbers, etc., load them in a database and start to do queries with some BI tools. Okay? Everybody has this. So you can build from this. You don't have to throw everything you did. So the next step into building a big data story is, all right, how do I start to enrich my data with spatial and geographical data, information? And the question here to ask is, who are my next customer that might churn next month? And where are my most important customer located? Think about the case of the telecom company that was trying to understand the micro community. This is exactly what they did. Okay, next one is, once you have this, is how you start to load low sensitive data. So all the Twitter feeds, social media information into a Hadoop cluster that allows you to process that data, pre-aggregate it before you start to analyze it. And the question here is, kind of doing sentimental analysis. So who are the customers that are most likely to buy my next product? What do actually people say about my new product launch? This is what you do with this kind of information. The next one is talking about velocity, and how can you use data at speed and process that and take action upon it. We did this case during the NATO summit this year. NATO summit took place this summer in Chicago. And the Chicago police basically was analyzing in real time Twitter feeds to understand where the rioters were in the city and how to reposition in real time the police forces to be able to stop them from making any serious damage. This is what we mean by being able to recommend and act on data that is very fast in real time. And the last one is when you, as I said, you remember, as a data scientist, it's the sexiest job of the next decade, but the problem is they are very hard to find. So you need, as business people, be able to make queries in a natural language. For instance, you do a product launch, and you'd like to find out which athlete is the most suitable for you to represent your brand. And Larry Ellison showed that demo 2 weeks ago at Open World in San Francisco. And the way you do that is, again, you go and you analyze Twitter feeds where the name of a champion is mentioned together with a car as a community of interest, and you cross the two together and you get a ranking, and that's then you understand with your brand what is actually the best athletes to actually represent you. This is what I mean by building up a story gradually, and as you add in building blocks to your architecture, you get more and more and more benefits. Now the footprint, basically you have two options. You can either do everything yourself, with open source and some very clever people. Some of them are kind of weird, but not very hard to find, but they're weird, especially in California. They have a beard and long hair, look scruffy. Yeah, dude, man, look at this thing, it's awesome. These type of people. But you have also the option of, and it will take you a lot of time, by the way, because I had that example from an executive in Turkey who said, it took us 6 months and 6 people full-time to try to get our hands into big data with open source software. And they say, it's too complicated, forget it. Let's use an architecture that is proven, that works, that allows you to build this, and does all the things that I've been talking to you about pretty much out of the box. The choice is yours. If I were you, of course, I'll go for you guys who use it longer. Okay, so in summary, what we talked about is, number one is how the big data, you get into this new dimension of becoming a data-driven enterprise, and rethink a little bit the role of how decision-making is made in your organization and the role of the HIPPO. It is absolutely a key strategy to grow your top line, especially if you're in the services business. Okay? And that has been widely recognized. We mentioned this notion of the data scientist being a key person in the company. And as I said, data warehouse architecture or strategy, you can build on what you have and gradually enhance it. And as I said, you have the choice of doing it with open source and figure it out yourself, or taking something that is out of the box. And you will see that if you get this right, your boss will say exactly what happened in the movie. He said, you're very good. Thank you.